Yamarin has long been a bit of a front runner in the Nordic day cruiser market, particularly around about the 8-metre mark. And in the past, we've seen 79 and 81 models. And here at the Düsseldorf Boat Show, we've got a new Yamarin 80DC. And this is a boat that tweaks and finesses that classical Nordic day cruiser formula in some very pleasing ways. Now we'll start by walking up this central walkway, because the boat on the left here, that's the 88DC, the day cruiser flagship, and that's quite a classical Nordic day cruiser in a lot of ways. If we look at that, we see the deep set cockpit, we see the step through screen to get up onto the foredeck, covered bow of course, cabins forward, and a smaller transverse cabin beneath the deck, outboard power as you can see. If we move over now to the 80DC, well, the first thing you'll notice is that there's no step-through screen. Instead, we've got a permanent side deck there, a nice little protected port deck that makes its way right round there onto the bow. Far more secure, far easier, I think, for people who are getting on in years as well. It can be quite a challenge to climb up those relatively steep steps and through that screen. And the idea here is apparently that they want to take the Nordic day cruiser and just give it a little bit more in the way of international appeal. And this is their solution. So it's a really interesting boat. Before we jump on board though, we'll take a little look at the engine. Now the engine we see here, the Yamaha F300, that's the maximum rig you can spec with this boat. And the base package price for that goes from around about 144,000 euros. Now you can spec a smaller engine just to drop the price, but really this is where you want to be, because with this engine on the transom, you can apparently hit around about 43 knots. That's a good sort of pace, enough sport to keep you entertained, but nice and safe for a family. Now the back end is pretty classical, you'd have to say. We've got the towing arch in the centre there, a couple of pretty substantial swim platforms, multi-tiered. And in here, I quite like this. It's a good place to slot your shore power and a little cutout so you can run it behind this stanchion if you like, keep it well out of the way when you're alongside. Stepping up and round to the port side, we've got another little locker down in here. There's your fuel filler. You've got your primer in there as well, but it's a decent space. You could fit some fairly bulky kit in there. And this is quite handy too. And quite often, certainly from the likes of Windy, you'll see the canvases can be erected, but only after you lift the engine bay lid. Well, this of course is an outboard powered boat, so that's not a problem. We have permanent access to that, simple as that. There are your canvases, there are the stanchions for them running behind the furniture on both sides very neatly, out of sight, out of mind, until it rains, when you're very grateful that the feature is there. Now we've got a nice bar on the back of this to help you make your way from side to side, but you can also use this, give it a little yank, and down it comes, just to extend your sunbed aft right towards that transom. There's also a table fitting in the centre there, of course, for this starboard dinette. But you can drop that into the space, use an infill, and create a really big starboard sunpad that doesn't block this staggered companionway in any way at all. So it's a really neat bit of design. Works the space very hard. Now let's pull this back up into position and make our way forward into the cockpit itself. Now, as I step into the cockpit, as you can see, what we have here at the helm station is a reversing backrest, and that's quite a useful feature too. Really works the space very hard again. If we step up onto this bench and look across to that 88, you'll see we've got permanent seats there instead. So this is a neat way to get the best out of the space. And that's certainly a dinette, I would say, big enough for 6 or 7 people. The boat is equipped to carry 10 apparently, but of course we've got that bow space as well, and we'll have a look at that in a minute. In the meantime, it's worth having a look at these seats on the port side. Now, as you can see, this seat aft of the wet bar is neatly angled to keep that companionway open as it wraps itself around the furniture and to that port walkway. And so is the co-pilot seat. That's a very compact little thing compared to the seats on more classical day cruisers, but of course you need to keep that space open and practical, and it's perfectly comfortable, I have to say. It serves another purpose in terms of the moulding above it, as we'll see in a second, because the wet bar itself, though it occupies quite a small footprint and it's not especially lofty, it doesn't feel at all intrusive, it does a really good job. We've got a bit of storage there and a decent size of sink. And if we open this up, you'll see we've got a nice drained locker there, ideal for your ice and your beer. And if we open this one up, fold that forward over that little co-pilot seat, well, you see we've got a single diesel hob plus a decent sink, compact but decent. There's a really good work surface here. And you have to say, that is a much better wet bar, a much more fully featured wet bar than you'd tend to expect on a boat of this size. Let's fold all of that away. Now, talking of storage, I have to say storage on this boat is a bit of a strength. If we come over here to this tapered seat on the port side, we've got a lovely, deep, beautifully lined storage tray in there. Same goes for the aft bench. Easy to lift up, very sizable. We've got the telescopic table leg there for this cockpit, and the table itself also fits in here. But as I say, because it's so well lined, your baggage doesn't clatter into cables and batteries because they're neatly concealed beneath that false floor. It's really beautifully arranged, that. And if you move over to that port seat that we looked at, well, this storage tray here, I'll need to remove the cushion for this so I can get the lid fully open. This storage tray here, that will also lift out, giving you access to your engineering spaces again. It's beautifully done, it really is. Same on the starboard side, another really good locker. And that's a very valuable feature on a boat that's designed to take small families away for long weekends. And let's fold this back into position and head forward again. But we'll ignore the helm station for a second. We'll ignore the cabins too, and we'll work our way up this port side deck. Now, as I say, it's relatively easy to navigate, certainly compared to the step-through screens we see elsewhere. And we've got a really handy, well-positioned bar here. A couple of steps up, and there we are. We've got a little deck drain here, and this, of course, closes right over when you want to protect yourselves from the wind blast. We've got a little gate that comes across as well, so you're fully protected in what is still a relatively deep set cockpit. And this port walkway works its way right round to that step-through forepeak. And of course, this raised section here, that's where you're going to get the bulk of your accommodation down below in that main cabin. And you can, of course, spec some cushions to line this starboard side, so you've got somewhere to sunbathe that's independent of that main cockpit aft. Now let's work our way back to the helm station, because the ergonomic sophistication of that really is quite something. Now, as you can see, we've got a good size of seat with individual bolsters. That's a very handy feature, and so are these. They're fantastically comfortable, slightly raised edges on both sides. Just hug your hips, keep you nice and snug. There's a nice bit of lumbar support in this as well. And as I move into position, you see we've got a well-placed foot brace down there and an adjustable wheel. A nice brow here over the two 16-inch plotters. Really comfortable wheel, actually, and I like the elevation of the screen. The screen rim from eye level is well out of the way, gives you plenty of protection and plenty of visibility. The struts are by no means too large either. It's very effective indeed, and this is really comfortable. Great place just to rest your arm, so you can really be accurate with your throttle work, and you could drive for a long time without any fatigue in your arm at all with that. Got a bit of switch gear over on the port side. We've also got the tabs and the bow thruster on the port side, which I'm not a big fan of, but it's perfectly serviceable. And we've got a joystick up on that tier of the dash. It's a really well sorted space, and there's some handy storage too down beneath here, plus an additional little tray with a charger and a drained cup holder there. So there's really nothing at all to complain about for the skipper. As for the accommodation, well, that's going to be interesting because, of course, this port walkway, that does drop the deckhead significantly in comparison to a classical day cruiser. So let's go down and take a look at how that is. Now, there's a nice aperture of door to get down without a problem. When you do so, if I turn that camera around, you'll see that we're pretty much around about shoulder level in terms of head height. So you do have to stoop a little. But what we get in here is quite clever. If I get down low and sit on the seat, you'll see that this moulding here, that is for the side deck. So it does steal a lot of that room on the port side, but they've been quite clever with that, because conventionally you would have an inward facing seat here just for changing, but they've changed that around because you'd obviously bang your back of your head on this moulding here. They've used a forward facing chaise longue style seat, and it really works quite well because you can fit beneath that and use the space that would otherwise be redundant. As for the bed itself, it occupies a good footprint. It's very bright, nice LED lighting recessed into the bulkheads and the deck head. It looks fantastic. A big hatch up above, plenty of mirror at the head end with the reading lights. And these windows are really impressive for a boat of this scale. Very generous indeed on both sides. Let's have a look under here. I'd anticipate we've got storage, and it looks like we have. Yeah, again, very well lined. And if precedent is anything to go by, then we ought to have, yeah, access beneath that false floor to some engineering spaces. Very thoughtful design, this, all the way through. Every corner you look into is quietly impressive. We got fabric linings on both sides for additional comfort. But what I'll do as usual is actually jam myself into that sleeping area at the forward end just to see how it fits a 6-footer, give you a sense of the perspective of the thing. There we are. Now that's pretty good, because you kind of anticipate that this might get in the way, but it really doesn't. This is a comfy spot. Quite snug for two up here because there's a significant taper. But of course this is designed to be a sporting boat as well as a quality weekender. So that's definitely a compromise worth making. Now let's just swing ourselves round to the starboard side and take a look at the heads compartment. Now this wood is quite pleasant. It's kind of a light oak veneer on ply. It feels very fresh, very modern as you'd expect of Yamarin. And the heads compartment itself is very nicely appointed. We've got a big mirror up top, a really generous size of window for a heads compartment. A little bit of extra headroom in here where the deck head lifts at that dash. And then a little bit of access to the back of the electronics at the dash. Decent size of toilet and some really useful quick access storage in there. Now there's no option for a shower in there, but if I just nip back out into the cockpit and head aft, you'll see that we do have a transom shower. And of course, if you investigate the options list, then you can make sure that you can have hot water for a proper Nordic style shower on the aft end of the boat instead. Now let's head back into the cabin because we're not quite finished yet. And this for me is one of the most impressive sections of the boat, and quite a surprise. If we look aft and lift that step, wow, look at the scale of that. That's a really impressive space. That is actually a better guest bed than you will see even on the flagship 88 DC, which runs transverse. This runs fore and aft, and it's all the better for it. It really is. And again, we've got these subtle little angles at the edge of the mattress, which just keeps you super comfy, just like at the helm seat up top. A bit of storage on both sides. No windows or natural light, but they've done a great job to compensate for that with white fiberglass, pale linings, and lots of LED strips, plus a few spotlights here and there, just to pick out the detail. Again, I'll nip in there just to give you a sense of the perspective. Well, it's really excellent. And actually, I hadn't noticed this. Now I've crawled in here, there's a little gap up in here with an opening porthole for fresh air. And that looks out onto the cockpit deck. Really nice little touch, that. It's really carefully thought through. And also on both sides, something else I didn't quite notice is we got vents. So if you've got the diesel heating option, you can keep yourself nice and warm. So there it is. I have to confess, I've been a pretty big fan of Yamarin day cruisers for many years now. Traditional, though some of them have tended to be. But in the form of this new Yamarin 80 DC, they seem to be taking the classical Nordic day cruiser in quite an exciting new direction. When yeah, it retains, I should say, all the critical elements that we enjoy about Nordic day cruisers, that lovely, safe, secure, deep-set cockpit for day boating fun. Pretty user-friendly, pretty practical accommodation for long weekends away, and also the promise of some serious performance if driving is your thing. But the addition of that port side deck just subtly enhances the package, makes it that bit more user-friendly. And for me, I think it will also enable this boat to command far greater appeal on the international market.